Welcome to Leadership, the unapologetic political podcast where we dive headfirst into the world of leadership, politics, and those pivotal issues that often go unaddressed. We're here to empower, educate, and ignite change with a special focus on inspiring women to step into positions of influence. In this podcast, we don't shy away from tough conversations. We're all about getting down to brass tacks, discussing what truly matters, and encouraging you to take the reins. Join us on this journey as we unravel the intricacies of leadership, delve into the political landscape, and tackle the uncharted territories of vital issues. Leadership is your platform for unfiltered, honest, and inspiring discussions that will drive you to make your mark on the world. Let's get started. Welcome to Leadership with Tammy Wilson. Today I'm speaking with Connie Pillich. Connie, why don't you share with the audience your role? Today we're talking about veterans. So please share what you do with veterans.
Well, I am a veteran. I served 8 years on active duty with the United States Air Force. It was about 152 years ago. So I was served in support of Operation Desert Storm and Desert Shield. I was stationed in the United States as well as overseas. So I got a little bit of taste of both types of duty stations. Currently, I chair the Veterans and Military Community Caucus for the Ohio Democratic Party. And our purpose is to educate candidates and officials and policymakers about the issues that impact us as veterans, our family members, as well as people who are serving now, either in the reserve/National Guard or in the active duty military.
Yeah, that's awesome. I went to the Veterans Caucus that you had last year, and it was really wonderful. And it was so great to see Ted Strickland there as well. So I definitely want to come again this year. So let me know
Ooh,
when the
got
next one.
exciting things planned this year.
Oh, cool. And so, what I want to talk with you about today, because, as a candidate, I go everywhere that I can to meet, different groups and find out what the needs are. And I went to a veterans meeting, and I was really surprised to hear that a lot of veterans, they don't really know the process or the proper code to get the benefits that they're entitled to. I was surprised to find out that anyone who has been to Afghanistan was exposed to the 250-year chemical, and please correct me on the names of these things. And then there's the forever chemical. Can you explain that?
Well, and it's not new practice, but in Afghanistan and in many combat theaters for the last 50 years, the American forces would have things they needed to discard. And so they would create a burn pit. And sometimes these could be the size of a football field, and lots of things that the Allies or that the Americans couldn't take home, they just discarded they incinerated into these burn pits.
Right.
Unfortunately, no one checked to see what these items were made of. And as a result, when they were burning, they released toxic chemicals into the air. And finally, was it in 2023? We finally saw somebody take some action on it and make it a presumption that you were exposed if you were in theater during the period of actions where these burn pits were being used. Now, it took a long time. If you want to look back to Vietnam, a lot of these poor guys who came home had been exposed to Agent Orange,
Yeah.
which was a poison used to uh, kill the enemy and to break down all the foliage so that we'd find the enemy. But our poor guys were near there too, and so
Yeah.
they got exposed, and they later developed cancer. And it was a huge, huge battle to get the VA to figure out that there really was a connection, and that
Yeah.
these veterans deserved some medical treatment and, frankly, other types of treatment as well. So it's the same thing. We had burn pits in Vietnam. We
Yeah.
had burn pits in Afghanistan. We had burn pits in Kosovo. We had burn pits in Iraq. pretty much anywhere we had any kind of concentrated operations, there were burn pits. And so these chemicals are deadly. They cause cancer. I have relations who got it during Vietnam, and I have friends whose children got it from being overseas in
Yeah.
Afghanistan.
My uncle, he was exposed to Agent Orange, and he's dealing with a whole host of health issues now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and all he did was show up as ordered.
Right. Right. Yeah, I was married to a Marine for almost 10 years, 9 years, 11 months. And
Many days. No,
and it's a whole different world. And people don't understand that. People that aren't in the military, they don't realize it's a whole different world. It's not just a lifestyle. It is a whole different world. I mean, they have bases that they live on, so it is a whole different, I mean, there's just no other way to describe it. It's a whole different world. And
it
if
has
you
its own
aren't,
culture.
yes,
It really
absolutely.
does.
And so I get so I'm very patriotic. I come from a very patriotic family. I have two uncles named after presidents. And I mean, they have their whole names, not just the first name, they have their whole entire name. And, it's just interesting to me. So taking care of veterans, I think, is extremely, extremely important. And I have done a lot of research and I've heard a lot of stories of how, mental health is an issue when they come back. I've seen the films also. I know that veterans are they have a high, more, compensity for being homeless or suffering with addictions. And I also worry about their excuse me.
Traumatic brain injury.
Yeah, I mean, just everything, just having them taken care of and getting the benefits that they need. So I want to talk a little bit about that. Have you heard of the movie Against All Enemies?
Yes.
Have you watched it?
Yes.
What are your thoughts about that?
It's pretty terrifying.
Mm.
So, so that was a documentary of what was going on with January 6th. They, the filmmakers attended some of the rallies that were held on the 5th of January. They interviewed people who were there. They interviewed people who helped organize it. They interviewed people who were injured. They interviewed a lot of people. They interviewed policymakers too, as well as combat veterans who did not participate in the insurrection. And it was, as a veteran myself, it was absolutely appalling
Mm.
to see how many of my brothers and sisters, military brothers and sisters, that is, for just forgot their oath to our Constitution and decided to throw it out the window in an attempt to make a coup, to execute a coup. It was also shocking to me how many military veterans voted to overturn the election that was done correctly, and they voted to uh, deny the Capitol Police officers the Congressional Medal. So these people have gone off into a kooky world and a kooky universe, and it is not in any kind of alignment with the reality that we face today.
Yeah.
The idea that some of these military veterans think Vladimir Putin could be our friend. Look, I was stationed behind the Iron Curtain. I I had the Berlin Wall. This was back when we still had the Berlin Wall. And if we went to East Berlin, which was I was allowed to under certain very narrowly defined circumstances due to my security clearance. But if we went there, you would see all the Russian soldiers and the East German soldiers and the East German guard towers and the no man's land filled with mines between our side of the wall and their barrier on the east. And you would see the results of oppression just by walking through the downtown, we could still see bullet marks in some of the buildings where the battles have been going on and the capture of Berlin in World War II. They've
Right.
not bothered to clean any of that up. And we also saw just everyday life things such as lack of shopping, lack of goods, long lines to get bread or meat. That's what communism does, and that's what Vladimir Putin stands for.
Right.
I'm sorry, anybody who doesn't know that should just give me a call and I'll tell them what I saw. In fact, one day, two East German soldiers who were stationed in a guard tower decided to escape. They had brought one had brought some wire cutters. They took a chair out across the no man's land, cut the barbed wire on the top of the wall, and they escaped. One of them left behind his wife and baby
Oh,
because
wow.
they wanted this whole strong was the call of freedom.
Right.
They wanted to think, to do a job they loved, to raise their children in freedom. They wanted to have different opinions.
Yeah.
They couldn't do that behind the Iron Curtain, and that is what the Soviet Union stood for then. It's what Russia, under Vladimir Putin, stands for today. We all know he's executed his political opponents and will continue to do so. So,
I know. Doesn't it just blow your mind? The power of mis and disinformation.
oh yes, the internet is a fabulous thing and a very dangerous thing.
Right.
And we see it, we see it with our friends who think, "Oh, I've got cancer, but all I need to do is eat more carrots and it'll go away," instead of listening to a qualified oncologist because they saw it on the internet. And then we see people like the one guy I talked to here in Cincinnati who thinks Putin's our friend. What's the big deal with Ukraine?
Right.
No grasp of the critical need for us to have peace in Europe, and no grasp of what will happen if Ukraine does not get aid and how that will escalate across Europe. And we'll be involved with our troops should that happen. They're
Right.
just these so-called leaders are cavalier and ignorant.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'd love to talk a little bit about what we can do at the local level because that's my group mostly focuses on state laws.
Hmm.
And we do have a wonderful Department of Veteran Services at which is part of the governor's cabinet. Uh, Governor Strickland created this back in 2007, I think it was. And I'm pleased that his successors, Governor Kasich and Governor DeWine, have continued to fund that department because it does provide some critical services. Um, and we do have there's usually a committee in the state legislature that includes discussions on veterans issues and military issues. But I think to me, our caucus finds four main issues that we focus on. One is access to health care. People like me, I don't get to go to the VA.
Oh,
I,
really?
I'm not eligible. I served
Oh,
in a timeline where people like me were not eligible unless we had a service connected disability. And so lucky me, I
wow.
came home whole. And so I don't, even if I use my own insurance, I can't go there. And they do offer services that I don't think I can find anywhere else that would be important to me, such as mental health services related to Putin's invasion of Ukraine. That was a tough time for me and many of my friends, my veteran
Oh,
friends. And but I couldn't go there. And I was willing to pay for it. Um, but also not just access to VA healthcare, but access to any kind of medical health care. That was changed. So Ohio has about 850,000 veterans, and most of them are over age 65. So
how
they
many?
850,000,
Uh-huh.
and most of them are over age 65.
Yeah.
We also have a lot of younger folks after the global war on terror. But if they're working and they're not eligible for VA benefits, they might need some help to pay for health insurance because health insurance is out of control. So that's why we need to make sure we continue to have Medicaid expansion. Look, I've traveled to every state in this county, pardon me, every county in this state.
I knew what you meant.
Yeah. I've traveled to every county in this state, and I tried to meet veterans in every county, usually by going to the VFW or AMVETS Hall or the um, American Legion Hall, and I would just talk with whoever I could find. And the number one concern of the people I talked to was
Healthcare.
healthcare, because
Yeah.
their job, where they used to work, and they made 25 bucks an hour, got shipped off to China or Mexico. So they had another job that now paid them 12 bucks an hour, and they had no health insurance. So a lot of these folks, they're working, they're good citizens. Why can't they access Medicaid?
Right.
So that's number one. Number two is end of life care.
Yes.
And like I said, most of these our Ohio veterans are over the age of 65. At some point, they're going to need end of life care.
Hmm.
And we do have two options for them. We have two veterans homes, one in
Oh,
Sandusky, one in Georgetown, so kind of north and south. And they will take people who've served, and it's a place that your grandparents might go to. They offer continuing care. So you go in, maybe you have assisted living or independent living, and as your physical abilities diminish, they can put you into higher levels of care. So
you
this
said
is end of life care.
one's in Sandusky, and where's the other one?
Georgetown,
Georgetown. Oh,
yeah,
okay.
it's southern tier. But that's all we have. It's not enough room for
No.
hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, and we have 850,000, which Ohio is such a major recruiting military state,
We're a big
and
military
I
state.
think that has a lot to do with the low job opportunities here and, um, just a whole host of reasons. But
Sure.
that is really interesting. I didn't know that.
Hmm. Well,
And I
that's
know,
what we're going to have to be ready for.
yeah. And then
And
I know that there are, the we have three homeless shelters, right? Veteran homeless shelters in Ohio.
I couldn't tell you. I know there's one in Cincinnati. I know there's one in Columbus. I
Yeah.
don't about any other places.
Okay. I
And
thought there
yes,
were
some
three.
veterans do seem to have a disproportionate uh, membership of the homeless population.
Yeah.
And that's all the things that cause homelessness. It's
Yeah.
caused by mental health issues,
Yes.
PTSD, traumatic brain
Jobs.
injury is a huge one. It's from the global war on terror that causes them to lose their executive functions and they get in trouble. Uh, we have substance use disorders, inability to hold a job, all kinds of things. And unfortunately, our veterans are a large population of that. Now, here in Cincinnati, we've been working really hard. Our local VA has been really focused on trying to attack that problem, and they do have goals both for male veterans and women veterans too, especially women with children. Been working on that. So we've got a new number of nonprofits that offer this shelter and take references from the VA.
Do we have reentry programs, so to speak?
Yeah, so that's one of our issues too. Reentry. So to me, reentry is when you leave your at your service and you go back into the real world. And you talked about it earlier. It's like going from, a Martian in a
Yeah.
strange land. You're going from this culture to some other culture that you used to be a part of it,
Yeah.
but it was so long ago and you've had so many adult years without it, you kind of forget.
Mhm.
And I found I when I came home from Berlin, just coming back to the United States was like, oh wow, people say things differently here, and
Yeah. Yeah.
and yeah, they live differently, and so you have to start to get used to it. Now I was healthy, so I could do that, and but not everybody has and also I was still on active duty, so I that was an easier transition for me.
Yeah.
But people do have some problems, especially if they have been deployed for 15 months. Think of our members of the Air National Guard and the reserves
Yeah.
who live in their hometown, and then once a month, they go for a weekend over at the base. And then they come home and they live their normal life. And then suddenly they're plucked out of their normal life for 15 months and sent to a war zone. And people in Ohio are still getting deployed, even though we're out of Afghanistan. But when they come home after living in harsh conditions, after living under heightened awareness, in instances where it could be very dangerous, it's tough to transition, and especially
Yeah.
people get to work, no one there is gonna understand you.
I
So there
know.
is a wonderful organization in Ohio called the Resurrecting Lives Foundation. It's like, getting your life back. Focuses mostly on veterans with traumatic brain injury because that was so prevalent in, um, in Afghanistan, and it's caused by physical activity, not mental stress. Although PTSD and traumatic brain injury are often intertwined like that.
Yeah.
But it's just trying to get back to work and trying to work with people who don't show up 20 minutes early or don't take the so-called work mission as seriously as you do, or don't respond quickly, don't iron their shirt before they go to work, stuff like that. So there are a lot of so we need transition services. We are fortunate that in Ohio, well, we are a big National Guard state, mostly Air National Guard, and we have one of the largest in the country with
Yeah.
18,000 members, and they do have some good transition services. They really do. I'm really proud of them. But we always want to make sure but that is a state level responsibility because
Oh.
yeah. So because they're
So
under
every state is different then with reentry?
Mhm.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. Now, if you're getting off active duty, there are specific programs designed at each base to get you ready. Mine was pretty flimsy, but it was, like I said, 152 years ago. And
You look
luckily
great.
yeah, I'm pretty good for 165 years old. Yeah. So I do want to talk one other thing,
Yeah.
the fourth thing that's
Yeah.
really to us, and that's the Veterans Treatment Courts. So when we're fortunate that in Cincinnati, Columbus, Cleveland, I know that there are Veterans Treatment Courts. So that's just a regular criminal court, but instead of going to court with everybody else, you have a special docket that's just veterans, and you go through the court system with 10 or 15 other veterans. So you have that camaraderie that of people with the same experience or common experiences. And most of these guys get into trouble, guys and gals have gotten into trouble with the law due to their military service. And a lot of
Oh.
them had traumatic brain injury, which messes up and interferes with your ability to make uh, proper decisions. And so you might drive without your license because you forgot to renew it. You might turn to alcohol or other drugs to numb your depression. You
Yeah.
might have trouble showing up to work every day, and then you lose your job, and then you lose your apartment, and then you lose your family, and then you lose your car. And so people might turn to crime. So it's all caused by their injuries, physical or otherwise, in the military. And so we want to see these, and so it works in conjunction with the local VA. So the accused comes to court with everybody on his team, all his colleagues, and talks with the judge, and then the VA takes over and gets them into some sort of treatment to get them out of their injury and or their substance abuse, their brain injury, their PTSD, whatever they have that led to their criminal offense. And not every county will do this, and we'd like to see every county do this.
Why won't they do that?
I think there's a lack of education. They think it's going to be expensive, or maybe they don't have a VA hospital close enough to them that's willing to partner because the VA hospital pays for all the treatment. not the local county, and not the local
So
corp.
for someone like you that can't go to the VA hospital, is that going to work?
No,
Oh,
but that's okay. I came back whole, so and that's okay. I didn't get injured. I didn't get injured in on active duty. So if I had, then I would be able to go to the VA.
but isn't that a lack of taking seriously mental health though? Because I mean, like you just said, the war in Ukraine triggered some things within you,
Mhm.
you know. Is that because they don't consider mental health as serious as physical health?
No, they didn't really explain anything to me because you do it online. And but my friends who do get care at the VA, my women friends from the American Legion, they did have um, service connected disabilities, and they tell me that, or they advise me that they get good care there, and that even though I had insurance, something in the application program didn't let me come there. So by the time I got all that, I was starting to feel better, and I decided not to try to cringe on anybody else's opportunity to get care.
Hmm. So we talked about mental health. So for what what is available for people that are in your situation to receive mental health services?
My own my own insurance. Thank
So
goodness.
like
Thank goodness
through
for
another job then?
yeah, or I can buy it privately if I was a millionaire. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um Now with that being said,
But I cannot get that mental health care at the VA. I'd have
right.
to go to the private sector, and, I'm lucky I live in Cincinnati, and we have very good health care, lots of providers, and I have good insurance, um, that
But
allows me. Yeah.
like you said, there's a difference with receiving mental health from people that can relate to your actual,
Mhm.
experiences and everything. So, wow, that's really
So what
interesting.
I do is I reach out to my friends in the American Legion, and they especially we have the American Legion Women's Post 644 here in Cincinnati. I'm not a member of that post. I belong to another one, but I have made a lot of friends at the Women's Post, and we all have gone through a lot of similar experiences. I mean, let's face it, 150 years ago, it wasn't common for women to be in the military, and some people had issues with it, and we all went through that. And so we share those challenges.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get help through your support system.
Yeah, and when I call my friends, it helps them too
Oh, yeah, for
to
sure.
talk about this, and so, I got them in my phone, I got them in my phone,
Yeah.
and I can call day or night.
So I spoke with this veteran and she was telling me how her divorce was being handled in like three different states. Is Would the Veterans Treatment Court, I mean, are they open to expanding that to different, legal
Yeah.
situations? Because, I mean, that's crazy to have three different, you know, courts involved in your divorce because where she was stationed, but then now she moved home because she got out of the military. Well, then her spouse moved to another state. So they have three different courts that they have to deal with. And it's just,
Well, so, as a lawyer, I did help, military active duty people go through a divorce. They might have been married in Germany, she was stationed in Kuwait, and their divorce was happening in Ohio, it was just that type of thing. But there are procedures in state law, they're gonna be treated by like everybody else in state law. this does happen. Sometimes people do move, they move home, they run away, but they still want to finish their divorce and they just have to consent to the court having jurisdiction. They're going to have to figure out one state or the other.
I see.
Yeah. And it probably, not knowing anything more, they might want to ask their attorney if they should just dismiss the where it was filed and then file in another state. But their attorney will be able to give them good guidance.
Yeah, yeah. I was just wondering if that was something that the veteran court could take care of.
No, because the Veterans Court is in the criminal court and divorces get handled in this other court. So they don't have, by state law, they don't have the ability to handle
Domestic.
more, yeah, domestic things. And
Yeah. But it's a deal when you have children, you know?
that's another court too. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
They only the Veterans Court as it exists today only handles criminal matters.
interesting. I'm just taking
And
notes.
those are the most serious, losing your liberty.
Oh,
Pretty
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty scary.
Mhm.
Um, so we talked about mental health. So what is the answer for that? To get the VA to accept, mental services. So do they do virtual visits then? Is that something that they've started doing? Because I remember my uncle, in Ohio, there's not that many veterans hospitals here. So he would have to travel like over an hour just to go to the doctor.
Right. Well, that's one of the challenges, but I have no idea if they do virtual visits or not because I don't get care there, and I've never asked what that is. I have visited people there, and gone to meetings there, but I've never had care there. So it's so we have three large VA hospitals in the state: Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland. I think
Is that
Cleveland
common? Do
to have.
other states have more than 3, or is that a lot for one state, or do you
Right.
know?
I mean, we have a pretty significant veteran population,
Yeah.
and um,
Don't we need more than 3?
well, we have more than three. They're just not big hospitals. We have VA medical centers in lots of different places. So,
Okay.
for instance, there's one in Dayton, there's one in Chillicothe, and in fact, I think it was the Trump administration that tried to close the one in Chillicothe. And oh my goodness, that was an uproar because it served people in over 20 counties.
Yeah.
And we were worried that our veterans would not drive all the way to Dayton to
Yeah.
seek
Yeah.
care. And they want to come into the Clifton neighborhood of Cincinnati, which has all this traffic and it has all those different hospital systems all gathered there, and they might not want to do that either. So
No.
that was a very scary time. And fortunately, um, our elected federal representatives in I think Representative Wenstrup and Senator Brown were able to fight this off and keep that open.
Yeah, Senator Brown's been a really huge advocate for veterans.
Oh, time and again, yes,
Yeah.
time and again. He has a really talented person on his staff that is dedicated just to helping veterans with their paperwork. And by the way, for people who don't know why they're denied access to VA care, it could be how they filled out their application. And
Yeah.
in every county in Ohio, there is a Veterans Services Commission, and that is funded by the state to help people with obtaining access to medical care. They provide temporary financial assistance. Like, suppose you have a high gas bill for them in the heating bill, and you need a little bit of extra one time. They can do those things. Transportation to the VA. Most of them have a van, but we also have the American these groups like the American Legion, AMVETS or American Veterans, the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. They exist to help veterans. Oh, and the disabled American veterans. They usually have a talented service officer who can help review your case and help you fill out the application for care. And they have done these for decades. So those
Yeah.
are all wonderful resources for anyone who needs help.
Yeah, I know that's a big deal because I know if they don't have the right code, then they will not get the
Exactly.
coverage that they're entitled to, and that's a really big deal. Why is that such a problem, though? Is there an easier process that can be done? Because I know that, when I went to that veterans meeting, the guy leading the meeting, he's an older gentleman that's retired, obviously, and so his job, or I don't know if it's his job or just something that he does, but his whole purpose is to help people get their paperwork filled out properly because it is such a problem. I mean, how can we make that a little easier for people?
Well, you'd have to rewrite the law. But look, anytime you're dealing with public money, laws are written to ensure things are being done appropriately.
Mhm.
And so sometimes the barriers are difficult. I couldn't tell you much about the barriers other than my experience and my knowledge because I've never had to fill out the paperwork, nor have I ever had to help anyone fill out their paperwork. Um, but I think that responsibility rests with Congress. If they want to make it easier while still safeguarding tax dollars against fraud, then they should try to do that.
Yeah,
I mean,
definitely.
it's a difficult balance, isn't it? Because I'm going to say this, and I mean it sincerely. It's very trendy to support veterans, but that doesn't mean a thing if you don't actually do anything. So we can say, "Oh
Yeah.
yeah, I support the troops. I support the troops," but then you deny them health care. You make it harder for them to vote. You
Yeah.
make it harder for them to use their military ID, things like that. Make it
Yeah.
hard for them to get a job or to
Yeah.
get the treatment, the healthcare and mental health care they need. So it's trendy to say you like it, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything good is coming out of that.
Yes, my opponent is very good at that. We'll leave it at that. Um, what else do you think is really important for veterans to know, for, people that are getting out of the service? My uncle had passed away, so it was nice for him to get the, veteran services for his burial, and we had the 21 gun salute, and it was really nice to have the different service members there. Uh, do you want to talk a little bit about that, perhaps?
Yeah, the burial services are really, really solemn and beautiful and just a lovely tribute to what the service member did.
Yeah,
And look, not everybody goes to the combat zone, but that doesn't mean they're not in danger. I
right.
was stationed in Grand Forks Air Force Base, and just a couple years before I got there, we had a bomber that was loaded with nuclear weapons, and the engines caught on fire.
Oh, wow.
And so we could have had a nuclear disaster the size of Chernobyl, but the Air Force firefighters, and yes, we do have Air Force firefighters, battled the blaze. They had to the blaze was helped by the fierce wind that North Dakota always has, and so that was a challenge for them, but they did manage to put out the fire. But there had been several, maintenance technicians inside the aircraft, and they all died.
Oh,
And they were
gosh.
sitting on US soil in peacetime, and they all died.
Right.
So, it everybody's at risk,
Yeah.
and so there is we all we say, "Oh, yeah, I signed on the dotted line," but we really did sign on the dotted line. And then, we volunteer,
Yeah.
and then we have families like you, and you're drafted,
Yeah.
'cause this might not have been what your dream was to be a military wife,
Right. Right.
but and your kids military kids, but you're drafted and you come along, and it makes it hard for everyone. So there's a couple of things I wanna talk about, just for Ohio. First of all, Ohio has made it harder for our military, active duty and deployed military stationed overseas to vote.
Yeah.
That was done, Governor DeWine signed it in January of 2023,
Oh,
and it did 2 things. It took away our right to use our Ohio authorized veteran ID card, authorized by the legislature. We're not allowed to use that when we vote anymore. Go figure.
wow.
I bet you they didn't have any veteran on the committee that wrote that bill. And number 2, they shortened the time for you to return your ballot from your overseas base. And let me tell you,
The turnaround in mail is,
yes, and here's how long it takes. One of our members from Cleveland was in Afghanistan, and he sent his ballot on time. He mailed it on time, postmarked on time, and he tracked it because you can track it now at your local board of elections. And it took 8 days to get counted.
oh,
But in today's election, with this bill, it would have been tossed out.
mm,
There's no reason on earth for that to happen,
yeah,
except for a disdain for our active duty military. Like I said, oh, it's trendy to say I support the troops, but they don't support the troops. And
yeah,
I implored, and so did many, many others. And we flooded the governor's phone voicemail. We sent him emails begging him to veto it. He
yeah,
could have, so he chose not to.
wow.
Then, if there were other things in that bill that were good, they could have just redone it.
Yeah.
Or they could have passed another bill to restore voting rights for veterans or
I
for
mean,
active.
there's no reason why to take anyone's voting rights away. I
Yeah.
mean, unless you have an agenda.
Oh, gee.
Go figure.
Yeah, they might. The other thing I want to talk about is um, some companies do have veterans hiring preference, especially
Hmm.
public organizations.
I was just going to ask you about jobs. Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't always pan out to anything. I uh, I applied for as an attorney with 5 years of experience. I applied to work for the government as an attorney. They were looking for people with at least 1 year experience. I had 5, and I was a veteran, and I couldn't get an interview. Don't know why. So, whatever. I but anyway, but it's supposed to be there, and it was fine. I got another job instead, so it didn't bother me, didn't impact my livelihood, but, I kinda wanted to stay in public service, but I wasn't allowed to. Um, but a lot of companies do have a veterans hiring preference, and a lot of the local VAs will do job fairs for people coming back.
Yeah.
The other thing is that every now and then on Memorial Day and or Veterans Day, you can get a discount at a restaurant. You might get like 50% off a meal. I think there have been some stores like Lowe's used to give a 5% discount to all veterans. So you might be able to ask around if you're a veteran and you had all those years where you were on active duty and you got paid very little for your time. This is
Might get a meal.
yeah, it's a small way for the rest of us to say thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. When I see people wearing veterans hats, a lot of times I'll pay for their meal.
Oh, that's nice.
Just something small anyone can do, you
Hmm.
know? Um, yeah. So when I was asking about the reentry, so there's one organization that helps with reentry because I was thinking, it would be nice if they would have a process to help with, you know, your benefits with mental health, with reacclimating back into normal life and helping you get a job and, you know, linking you with a support system. So there isn't a process that includes all of those things that they kind of take people through. I
Yeah,
mean,
sure.
when you
Actually,
sign up for the military, you have to go through boot camp and, it's a whole process. So they don't have an exit process with all of those things to make sure because I feel like if we do have one, it's not effective or as effective as it needs to be because there's so many people suffering from mental health and addiction and homeless and all of these, and not having jobs and addiction and everything. So can you kind of
So
expand on that?
sure, each base will do something we call out processing because you're being processed out of the military.
Right.
And there are briefings and forms and hints, connections to how do you reach your local VA? How do you reach your local Veteran Services Organization? How do you apply for these benefits? When's the deadline to apply for life insurance? They give you those things. At least they did when I got out a long, long time ago, and I can't see any reason for them to do anything different. Where we have found the biggest, first of all, they don't find you a job, but when I got out, they did have resume review services. And some bases, especially in the Army, they'll bring uh, prospective employers onto the base
Oh, yeah.
to meet. So now this is active duty. But when you have people coming home from who are members of the Guard or the reserves, and they get deployed and they just come home and go home, they don't have a base nearby. Their
That's
base
true.
might be 300 miles away. So
Right.
that's where we have the problems. I think that's where
Okay.
things spring up the most. But like I said, the Ohio National Guard has done a pretty good job of helping with those services. But I don't know I don't have any knowledge of what the reserves do. I just don't have any knowledge of that. There's also one last thing I want to talk about is one thing that we're finding is that these young airmen and these young Army privates, they do experience food insecurity because they
Mm.
don't get paid very much.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes, you know how young people will get married in the military sometimes.
Yeah.
And you were one of them. So
Yeah.
then there's a family to support. And if you get transferred somewhere else, the spouse might take some time to get a job. And so the family loses half their income. Still got it.
Well, I couldn't even get a job when we lived in Japan.
Oh, there you go.
I had to volunteer. I could not get a paycheck.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
the strangest thing. And well, I take that back. The one job I could get, I could be a substitute teacher at the school. So I actually taught first
Basically.
grade.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, how
But
fun.
that was a temporary thing. It wasn't like a full-time position. So yeah, it's very interesting. Like I said, it's a whole different world that people are not, really aware of. And then, when your spouse goes away for deployment, you know,
Yeah.
and they're gone 6, 9 months at a time, and you're in a foreign country, you have no job. And I mean,
Yeah. You're
it's
very
interesting.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's weird.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. So we
yes,
do
food
have to remember the
insecurity
family.
what's that?
We do have to remember the families.
That's the other part of it too, because, and that is a big deal, and I had not realized there's a process that you go through mentally and emotionally when your spouse is getting ready for deployment.
Mhm.
And so I finally found connections on base with wives. And that is when I actually learned, oh, this is why we're arguing so much because we're both getting in, mental, emotional, I don't know, the ability to take the distance or something, I don't know. It was really weird. But had I not found that out, I would not have been able to understand what was going on between, us as as a couple. But
Yeah.
that's not really that readily, made available to people, or the knowledge that even existed, those resources were even there. I
No.
think as a military they need to do better to. So yeah, I think taking care of the families is a deal. So what
Mhm.
has changed? Because I mean, I say I got out, so I got out in 2000, well, 98, so it's been quite a while. So I don't
Yeah.
know what the since then we got cell phones, and
Mhm.
there's been a lot
Zoom,
of.
Zoom,
Yeah,
podcasts, yeah, totally different
yeah.
now.
So we had Skype then. So when
Oh,
I lived in, yeah, I would Skype with my parents, and you listen to the dial up and everything. So so at least we had that. But I wonder how the rules have changed in terms of When they're deployed, are they allowed to take a cell phone? I mean, how does that work?
Sometimes, yeah. It depends on, they can't always take the cell phone into work, because if they're working, in a secret vault, a vault with secrets in it, they none of those, digital devices will be allowed inside.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Because I remember the mail would take, like, a month, so I can't imagine
Yeah,
voting.
it was 10 days for me, yeah. Yeah, so it's also hard for, Americans who are just living and working overseas,
Yeah.
impacted in the same way. They
Oh,
always have access to the US Postal Service or the Army Post Office like we
yeah.
did.
Wow. Yeah, very interesting. Well, I think this was a really enlightening session. I'm so glad that you were able to join me and you gave a lot of really good, information for people. In your opinion, what else needs to be done to support veterans to make their lives easier, their transition easier? What are
I
like
think
3 top things that you think that we need to change?
I I think I started with my 3 top things: access to healthcare, like Medicaid expansion, um, end of expanding the number of veterans homes, so we have end of life care, and certainly the treatment courts, expanding those. But also, let's fix these issues with our right to vote, our active duty right to vote who are deployed. That's pretty heinous.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
I would like to see more help in terms of the mental health and the transition back into civilization. I think that we need to do a little bit better with that. Because so many people don't have jobs. They have a hard time getting a job,
Even
you
in
know?
today's market, yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
market's tight, but even today, yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And
Well, thank you so
it's hard to translate the skills you have from your military duty into
right.
something, a layperson could never understand, could understand, because they have absolutely no idea. Really, it's only
Right.
1% of Americans are in the military, so that's leaves a whole lot of people who've never been in.
Right. Right. I was really shocked to find 850,000 in Ohio. That
Yeah.
is just amazing to me.
We're a
Wow.
big military state, even though
I know.
we've only got, I think, just 1 active duty base, but we got a lot of Guard and Reserve.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't realize there was that many.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Connie. I really appreciate your time, and I just thank you so much. That was just so wonderful.
Well, it's my pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us in the Leadership Podcast, a podcast designed to inform, educate, and empower you. I'm your host, Tammy Wilson. I hope today's show inspired you to take your next step in leadership in your life, in your community, and our world. I know together we can make the world a better place. Thank you and see you next time. Until then, live to lead.